Episode of Guest Sundays. I'm so excited to be introducing you to Travis Richey, and we're going to have an incredible conversation about his story and about the things he's been doing for the prison system and the inmates that are incarcerated right now. Don't miss this episode. And guys, the Recovered on Purpose show is brought to you and sponsored by all the students in the Recovery Speaker course that have said yes to sharing their stories powerfully with the world to help addicts suffering. Today's student shout out goes to Crystal Lavender. Crystal has an amazing story of overcoming a meth addiction that started at a very early age. She came to an event I was speaking at in the beginning of 2021 and made a decision that night that she wanted to be able to say, I am recovered on purpose. And she has been clean ever since and made the decision to take the leap to share her story with the world. I'm so proud of you, Crystal, and honored to be on this journey with you. Enjoy the show and keep living Recovered on Purpose.
The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live recovered on purpose.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Travis. Travis Richey is an entrepreneur, a motivational speaker. Having invested in over 25 companies in the last 15 years, he knows a thing or two about success and, more importantly, failure on the road to success. At the age of 25, Travis managed a hedge fund with millions of dollars under management. Due to a regulatory oversight in the state of Arizona, he was charged with transactions of an unregistered securities dealer and sentenced to 2 years in Arizona Dept of Corrections. This 17,520 hours became the framework of Travis's new mission in life. He founded Accomplished Ventures to provide incarcerated and returned citizens the proper resources for a second chance at a successful life. Over the past 8 years, his curriculum and programs have been used by hundreds of thousands of inmates and over 125 jails and prisons. Currently, his content is seen in over 500,000 prison tablets daily in the U.S. Accomplished Ventures has become the largest prison curriculum and content provider in America. Sometimes referred to as the Tony Robbins of the prison world, Travis speaks the language of failure and perseverance to inmates nationwide, bringing them hope and purpose. Travis believes that the worst prisons in America are not the ones made up of concrete and steel, but perhaps the limitations of the self-doubt which keep us locked inside of a mindset, and even worse, a life that does not serve our potential or purpose. Travis founded Convicted Mindset, a program focused on unlocking the potential of people around the world. Guys, I'm so excited to introduce Travis. Travis, thank you so much for being here, brother. We really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure. I love what you're doing, and I think anytime that guys like us can get together and share the real adversity that we go through on a daily basis, I think it is supposed to help the world heal. So I'm grateful to be here, my friend.
Amen. And I agree with that so much. We that have recovered from, these dark times, whether it be, drug addiction, or we went through, a prison sentence, us that have transformed our lives, we have to be sharing our stories. We have to be giving back, because that's literally what our call is now. So in your bio, you talk about what happened when you were 25, right? Give us a little bit of information on that story, what was going on, why you got sentenced, and then we're going to go into, how that turned into your purpose and your call.
Yeah, man, I had the tiger by the tail, the world, the worldly views, if you will, married, successful, financially successful, all those quote unquote things that we subscribe to. But, God had a different purpose for my life. And that's what I have loved to be able to really focus on. For me, my charge was very simple. It was very unsexy. It was transactions of an unregistered securities dealer or salesman. Simply put, we did not file the right paperwork with the and since then there's been many changes in securities laws that paperwork wouldn't even be relevant in today's world. But nonetheless, in 2007 it was. And so when that charge came to me, it read like a thesaurus and a Greek thesaurus at that, because I didn't have, the experience in the judicial system. I didn't grow up as a troubled teen, and I wasn't in and out with drug addictions or anything. This was really my first time in, the justice system. And as I navigated that system, I realized that it was incredibly one-sided, and it wasn't going to be on our side in terms of favor. So, I was really able to look at it and say, instead of just identifying a problem, which I hate to do, let's figure out what a solution could be to some of the problems that are happening in the incarcerated community.
Yeah. And what is the recidivism rate of people that go to prison?
Golly, man, it's incredible. 8 out of 10 individuals that go to prison or jail go back within a 3-year time period of their release.
Wow. And I want to mention it really quick. I'm with you on the one-sided thing. I think that prisons are privatized and the system is kind of made to keep people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually charged with a felony when I was sick, when I was really sick. I'm actually going to play you this video real quick. This is what I was charged with a felony for. So right here, I was found behind the wheel of a car, overdosed from fentanyl.
Good gracious. You don't even look alive.
I wasn't breathing, no pulse. They're looking for a pulse here. And, luckily, I was one of the very lucky ones who came back. And in that time, when I had to watch that in court, and they gave me a 5-year suspended DOC sentence, which,
wow.
For anybody out there that doesn't know what that means, that basically means I was put on probation. And if I screw up, I have 5 years in prison that I have to go to.
God.
And the charge that I had was this much dope. And then in my probation, I couldn't stop using.
Oh.
And my probation officer, he couldn't find me treatment. I couldn't get help. So it was as if the system was made to end up incarcerating me.
Yeah.
And I wish there was more resources for people that are facing things like that also, And you said something that, the justice system is one-sided. What do you mean by that? And how do you flip that into being two-sided or having opportunities for people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, there really isn't very many resources out there, unfortunately. So when I say that it's one-sided, what I mean, when I go in and I get to talk to these individuals or these departments of corrections, bureaus of prison, I tell them that the system isn't broken. The system is working in the exact manner that it was designed, unfortunately. Ooh. So when you start to look at data, we love data in the United States, right? We pass all these bills in Congress yesterday, big dollars are spent based on data. Well, 8 out of 10 individuals who go to prison are not receiving the help that prison is supposed to provide, so they end up going back. And so when you look at it in terms of a business, right? Let's say 8 out of 10 Ubers got into a car crash every day. 8 out of 10 Teslas failed on the autopilot. 8 out of 10 Delta Airlines fell out of the sky every day. There would be no more industry. Right. It wouldn't happen. People would start to look into it. They'd say, what's the problem here? If you tell us you can get on an airplane and take us from point A to point B and we don't get there 80% of the time, there's a flaw in this business plan. Yeah. Well, with the prison industry, it's the exact opposite. The more individuals that fail, the more dollars are put into the system. And the more dollars that are put into the system, the more people are incarcerated. The more people are incarcerated, the more employees are needed. The more employees that are needed, the more prisons and jails and cells are needed to be built. The more prisons and jails and cells that need to be built, the more land is sold. The more developers are, right? It's this humongous opportunity of failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is what percentage of people incarcerated are nonviolent offenders?
Boy, I'll tell you what, not only nonviolent offenders hover around 40% of individuals right now in the United States. Wow. 4 out of 10 people, you look at my case specifically, nonviolent, non-dangerous, non-repetitive. Those are supposed to be 3 buzzwords in the justice system that are like a big deal for mitigating sentences. Yep. If it was your first time, if it wasn't a violent offense, if it wasn't a repetitive offense, those are supposed to be large mitigating factors. And when you look at the rehabilitation, what I found when I was incarcerated was that when I looked at this similar to a business, the root cause was never treated. And so what I meant by that is like, so for example, your sentence, had they charged you, and incarcerated you, your sentence wouldn't have matched your character. You were probably driving, or they gave you some sort of DUI, or, some sort of a vehicle related charge. And oftentimes that never addresses the issue, because while you would have been incarcerated, they would say, okay, you have DUI charges, you have Department of Motor Vehicle fines, you're not able to get a vehicle, your driver's license is suspended. And the reality is, you really don't care about the vehicle. You're a drug addict.
Right.
Like, Adam was a drug addict. And so unfortunately, that was never his character that was charged. And so it's very interesting when you start to pull at the root cause and you start to relate like some root identities to it. Individuals will come in for a DUI. Individuals will come in for car theft. Individuals will come in for robbery. And none of them were really the root cause. The root cause typically was some sort of an addiction. It could be gambling, it could be drugs, it could be whatever. But because of the charge, it was never addressed while incarcerated. And so then they would get out most of the time with bigger connections and a bigger desire for that same addiction.
Yeah.
And they would run into the same people, the same places, the same things. And then it would be a reincarceration all over again. And because of the statistics and the data, that's how it was supposed to be. And so nobody would look at you and say, hey, Adam, why does 80% of your caseload as a probation officer go back to prison? All you have to do is point to the data and go, well, that's because they're supposed to.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
It is crazy. And I know, and I don't fault my probation officer for that. I don't fault his, because his heart for me was amazing. Like I had nothing but good experiences with him. I would go into him high out of my mind, unannounced, and tell him I can't stop. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I was asking him to put me in prison because there wasn't anything for me to do.
Right.
He wouldn't let me go. He was like, nah, there's it's not going to help you in there. Right.
It's not.
Yeah. I've also heard stories of people that get like, a 2 or 3 year sentence, and then they end up with life.
Yes.
Because something happens, and then they have no choice except to act upon it. How often does that happen?
Happens all the time, to be honest. I talk to these guys all the time. And most of the time it's the younger kids. I'll unfortunately, right now in the prison system, approximately 30% of all juveniles that are incarcerated experienced an addictive substance for the first time with their parent or guardian. So when you're looking at that, it doesn't really put you in an advantage to begin with. I get to talk with these youngsters, and I hear some stories that are just incredibly sad. They'll say, oh, when I was 14, my mom gathered me and all of my friends, and she got us all drunk, and then she handed me the AA Bible and told me, you're going to need this. Not really setting up a kid for successful trajectory, if you will. And so when you look at how that impacts the juveniles, fast forward to some of the charges at play. So an individual comes in at 14 without an identity. They get 2 or 3 years. It turns into 16 or 17. They can't really find themselves, so they recidivate. They go back. Now they're an adult. And so now they've been to the system twice, 3 times, etc. And now they're 18 years old facing a 5-year sentence. Well, 18 years old to them is kind of a lifetime because they've been in the system since they were 12 or 13 or 14. And so now 5 years, could seem like an eternity. I might not make it out alive. So then they start to do things. Drugs are incredibly prevalent inside the prison system. They're probably as prevalent as they are on the street. I know that's hard for a lot of people to understand, but it's true. And so when they get drugs on the inside, and then now it becomes a game of Russian roulette. How do I get the drugs? How do I get the money to get the drugs? And so then the things start to happen. And so you've got a 5-year sentence, you're a heroin addict or, fentanyl or whatever it might be. And you know that somebody on the tier has the drugs, and that person on the tier needs something to be done. And so it just becomes this horrible cycle where an 18-year-old kid ends up getting out of prison at the age of 38 after 20 because he came in with a 5-year sentence, was a drug addict, and had to do things in order to survive.
Wow. And they just they grow up in the prison system. Yep. That's what they learn.
Yeah, and what I've realized is a lot of these kids, when they end up getting out, if they're fortunate enough to get out, they're usually, when they get out, mentally the same age as when they went in. And so if an individual is, on paper 33 years old, but they went in at the age of 18, mentally they're usually around that 18 years of age. They haven't experienced, college. They don't know what it's like to talk about credit. They don't have any friends, just by default, just by default, since you've been on this side, of your journey, you start talking with people in a different fashion. People start talking about different things. I mean, look at you. You live outside the country.
Yeah.
And so you experience life just by default, right? And so when you're incarcerated in a 6x9, there is no default. There is no experience there. It just is concrete and coldness and a lot of individuals that are trying to use you for their benefit.
Wow. You know, I built a company in 2012 with one partner. He was my best friend. He was my manager at another company before we decided to
Wow.
open our own company. And he did 13 years.
Wow.
And you know, when he came out, and I watched him, and I watched the way that he worked and the way that we worked together. And then, you know, when we would talk about his past and what used to happen, it didn't seem like he did the classes, he got, you know, a degree inside of prison and everything, but it almost seemed like he made the decision himself. It
Yeah.
didn't seem like, you know, he was told by anybody. It didn't seem like he had that opportunity for someone to come in and change him.
Yeah.
He just like, he had that strong will to make that decision himself, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think where your friend is, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but your friend probably developed a belief system,
Mm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's I often kind of cringe when people go, oh, you know, motivation. Like motivation for me is, you know, cute quotes or, you know, pithy sayings. But you know, when you were there laying on the street, all the motivation in the world wouldn't have got you off of that addiction. You know,
Mm.
going into your probation officer, reading all the Tony Robbins books in the world, you were still addicted to fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
And so then you had to develop a belief system to where you believed that you either deserved better or were better or could be better. And that belief system is what carried you to where you are today. And so your partner probably had to do the same thing. Like when an individual is incarcerated, it you have to develop a belief system that's so strong that it creates your programming.
Mm.
And so that programming carries forward with you, whether you're incarcerated or not. And a lot of times, as you know, so many of the worst prisons in America are not concrete and steel, but they're these limiting beliefs that a lot of individuals subscribe to. I'm
Yeah.
not good enough. I'm never going to be smart enough. I'm never going to be rich enough. I'm never going to date her. I'm never, 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 never. And unfortunately, it creates that programming for you that either limits you or pushes you towards greatness.
Yeah.
But most people, I would say, have this like negative story of themselves. And those thoughts are what actually create their programming. So I'm not good enough to start this business because I'm not smart enough, because my boss said so, because I screwed up on my review. So I might as well never go after it. Right.
Yeah.
And so no motivation in the world will change that. But the belief system, the belief in yourself, the belief in the idea, the belief in your identity, hopefully, where you can really get to, that's what I hope changes the world, is that belief system, not just some fun quotes.
Amen. And I'm with that 100%. I think that, and you know, the weird thing is, in my addiction, I read a lot of Tony Robbins. I was coached by high level people while I was an addict. While I was shooting up heroin, I was always writing on whiteboards and like planning this and planning that, but I couldn't ever, you know, actually fulfill on the things because I couldn't get rid of drugs, and I would always fail. I would continually fail. And in my recovery, I don't know if there was actually ever like I would say the shift in belief was that I didn't believe in myself being able to do it anymore. So I released control of it, because for so many years I kept like in my grasp, like, I'm going to go to this many meetings. I'm going to go to this church and this Bible study. I'm going to go to here and make all these plans, holding tight around, you know, around the neck, my plans. But then as soon as I switched, realizing that I can't do this, and I had this new belief that, okay, if I can't do it, I need God. I need God to do it. And when I became that willing, that's when it happened. And what I noticed about my friend and business partner was that I don't know if we ever talked about those beliefs, but he always did the actions. He was coming to pick me up at 7 a.m., 6 days a week, and we are hitting the doors, and you're selling this pest control, and I'm doing the services every single morning. There was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't say, bro, I don't want to go today. I don't feel good. He would be like, get your ass up. You know, we got work to do, you know? So just these constant actions. So maybe that's the belief.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the belief system.
No, big time, bro. And I think what's interesting is like, I like to call it the triangle of change. There's like three parts to it, so to speak. But, when you look at yourself as an individual, the story that you tell yourself is one that you've created. And so, like, as simple as that might sound to people, you hold the pen.
Yep.
It's your right. It's like your pen that writes your script.
Mm.
And I think that's so simple. It doesn't have to be profound. It's like literally like your buddy waking you up every day, like the constant actions. Like, you wrote this script. If
Yeah.
you feel you aren't good enough, you're right. If you feel you are good enough, you're right.
Amen.
And then it's the programming, the conversations. It's like, it's a scary thing. I go in and I talk to these youth all the time, and I say, everybody raise your hand if you would say that you make poor decisions. And they all raise their hand. Yep. And I'd say, this is where we have to stop. All of us in our past have made bad decisions. That doesn't mean that that's who we are.
Yes. That's
right?
so good.
That's the biggest thing. It's like, so many of these individuals have to understand, like, I'm sure on Amazon right now, there's probably 250,000 books on self-help, right? Like, there's maybe more, could be way more.
Yeah.
But everything that these folks are searching for, and anybody who's listening to this, whether you're coming out of a tough situation, a situation of darkness, a situation of addiction, a situation of loneliness, right? Like, there's something out there that's divinely meant for you.
Amen. Yes.
That's what I want you to pull out of this conversation with Adam and I. Like, the two of us have been in a situation where, like, there was nowhere down. It was bottom, right?
Yeah.
But
100%.
your DNA, my DNA, your reason you're here, my reason I'm here, like, spending another day having a negative conversation with yourself is only ignoring your identity.
Amen. And there's you said something in there with, changing the mindset to, writing your own script, raising your hand if you make poor decisions. That's like affirming you're making poor decisions.
Yeah.
And one of the affirmations I read daily is, I'm on a mission from God and always prioritize his call over my pleasures. And that's something I speak into myself, because that's how I want to live. I want to make my decisions based on this call and this purpose that God has given me. I didn't always think like that, living impulsively in addiction or whatever we're doing with our life. It's difficult to break, but once broken, it's a totally new life. And I want to ask you one question that, because you've been in there, who is benefiting so much from creating this system that keeps us down and locked up?
So many people, unfortunately. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. And there's so many individuals that benefit from it. They're publicly traded organizations and companies. And when you really start to look at the finite details of it, okay, if an individual is in a state Department of Correction, they are given a dollar amount for a bed. It's kind of like a rental rate for an Airbnb. Look at it just that simple. And the state is simply going to say, here's our rental rate for our bed. Here's our expenses for our room. And the profit is going to be the difference. Wow. And in between there, we're going to have all sorts of providers that are going to pay us money. We're going to have religious organizations. We're going to have donors. We're going to have nonprofits. We're going to have the food service industry. We're going to have telecommunications. I can go on and on and on. It's a laundry list. Yeah. And so as long as we can keep our occupancy rates high, as long as our Airbnb is full, we're going to have all of these other ancillary products that are going to want to sell to our consumers. It's a business, my friend. And it's kind of shocking when people look at it that way. But as dumb as it may sound to some people, when you have 4.5 million people locked up every night, if you can charge 17 cents for an email, it's a lot of money.
Whoa.
Think of it. Very simple, right? And that's just an email. Nowadays, it's photos. They have these tablets inside, kind of like an Android-based tablet. They can have phone calls, like a FaceTime without a face. They can send emails. They can send photos. They can send videos, short videos. And all of that has a price to it. All of it has a price to it. You're looking at food, You're looking at protein powder, supplementation, shoes, and everything has a price to it. Everything.
Wow. And I just remembered this and started thinking about this. I started getting emails from jails when my book started going into jails and things like that. And I had to pay to send emails to them.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow. But are we supposed to not do it? Are we supposed to not do it and not support the people that are locked in there?
I know, man. I do it. I say it all the time. You have to support them, right? You have to support them. I think if you're really looking at it from a faith-based perspective, we'll go there for just a moment, right? When you look at all the heroes of the Bible, the Old Testament, right? Joseph from Egypt, sold into slavery, lived in a prison. Job, was supposed to be perfect and had a hell of a year, lost his family, right? And so I think if you're looking at it from a faith-based perspective, the individuals who we read about that we subscribe to be like are individuals who have been in the pit.
Yeah. Amen.
You've learned something there, right? I don't know about you, but when you're talking about anything like a CPA, a personal trainer, a business coach, you never want to take advice from the guy that's like, hey man, haven't sat for the exam yet, but I'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot of people selling that though.
Dude, don't even get me started on the gurus.
Yeah.
Oh,
let me show you how to make $1 million by making $1 million off selling how to make $1 million.
Thank you. From my mom's basement in my rented BMW. Don't get me started, bro. I'll go nuts on it. Yeah. I'm with you 1,000%. But you look at these guys, you live the addiction life.
Yeah.
And so you have these coaches that are in there like, look, just put the cigarette down. And you're like, dude, miss me with that mastermind BS.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. You've got to reverse engineer. You've got to pull out the pain and the trauma of a childhood. You've got to pull out the insecurities of an adulthood. You've got to pull out the people that are influencing. Like, this is so much more than like, oh, come on, Adam, just don't use the needle, my friend.
You tried.
Bro, and I'm telling you, and that's what irritates me about this social media game at the moment. Like, I made a post last week. I said, all of your gurus are broke. Because it's super frustrating to me that a lot of people that are out there are just screaming at their iPhone and thinking that you have to yell at people and swear at people in order for them to make a change. It's not the case, in my opinion, right? Open to being wrong. And I know there's thousands of people who are yelling and screaming and swearing at phones that are doing very well right now. But that's just not my MO. I don't think that that's a lasting change. I don't think that, you fast forward 10 years, I've been married 15 years and I've got 4 little ones. And when I look at my daughters, who are 7 and 3 and 15 months, the way that you make a change in them is not by yelling and swearing.
Preach.
And so you can't make a full-term identity shift based on a short-term transaction.
Yeah.
I have to instill confidence in my daughters at the age of 7 to let them know that they are special. Not that they can get anything they want special, but that they have an identity from God that makes them special. And we have to develop their purpose.
Yes.
And so if I don't want them to yell and swear at me, I shouldn't be yelling and swearing at them.
Yes.
And so at the age of 7, 27, 57, 77, I don't think that you can always yell and scream and swear at the Instagram phone to make a change in the world.
Amen. Amen. And for people that watch this show regularly, I'm usually very animated. I'll say that. Very animated and moving around and, yelling and everything, obviously not cussing at people or telling them that kind of stuff. But I like this energy that we have together, because it makes it so that, we're talking about how to change your mindset without, having to do all this guru-y and powerful stuff. I believe in it all, and I think that people that have found their path to purpose, their path to their best self, it's good for them to help others find that path because there's different personalities. Different personalities. And some things work for everyone. There's certain strategies, there's certain hacks, mind hacks, practices, habits that work for everyone. And guys, we're going to take a 30-second break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how he implements these with the prison system and people that are coming out. See you in a second. What's up, family? I hope you're enjoying this episode as much as I do when I'm making them. And guys, if you are getting value from this, if you've heard any golden nuggets that you think other people should hear, make sure that you're sharing it with your groups or your pages so other people that are looking for a message of hope are able to find it. Also, in case you weren't here for the beginning of the show, if you have a recovery story and you want to learn how to add impact and income through sharing it, follow the link in the pinned comment to book your one-time, 100% free call with me, where we're going to strategize exactly how you can share your story and do just that. Enjoy the rest of the show. Keep living Recovered on Purpose. All right, Travis. Let's go into, what it is that you have created and why. So you're in this prison sentence of 2 years.
Yeah.
And you have this, you're looking for the solution. You see the problem, but instead of focusing on the problem, you look for the solution. What does that look like? And what did you start seeing when you're looking for the solution?
Yeah, the solution to me at the time, not only was it my background, but it was easy for me to articulate, came down to dollars. And what I found, I actually got very, very fortunate during my sentence. My 15 months that I was actually in, for the last year, I was able to leave the yard every day, very minimum custody yard. And they had an agreement with a community college. And so I was the tutor out there. I would go out there and I would teach the business 101 and the financial literacy stuff. Wow. And not only was it an opportunity, but it was also therapeutic, Adam.
Yeah.
Right? Like I found myself in the service of others. And so it kept me going Monday through Friday. And so I would start to really, because I was new to this industry, I would say, like, what's the problem? What's the barrier to entry? And they'd say, well, when I get out, I can't get a job. Okay, well, let's talk about that. When I get out, I can't get a car. All right, let's talk about that. When I get out, I can't. And I thought, okay, if we boiled all these things down on a whiteboard, they would start with financial literacy.
Yeah.
If I was able to get you guys to walk out with $1,500 and you were able to walk out with a 620 credit score, it might be a different outcome because you're able to go lease a Toyota Camry, for example.
Yep.
Mind-blowing, simple stuff. I found most of these guys didn't understand what FICO score even was, let alone, credit worthiness and arbitrage and any of the above. I tell the joke all the time. One of the Mexicans on the yard, he would always joke with me. He came up to me and he'd say, hey, I hear you talking about FICO. I know that homie too. It's great. And so I realized then how much they didn't know. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to put together this financial literacy course and we're going to start with everything. And we're going to end at how to buy a car. What does it mean? What's a buy here, pay here law? Why it's a bad idea? What's an annual percentage rate? All of these interesting things.
Yeah.
And so that was my kind of give back. Here you go. Here's my course. Here's my literacy. Make sure to spread this with the world. And after I was released, the prison industry called me and said, hey, we heard about this course. Can we have it? And I said, sure, I'll send it to you. And then it went wildfire. I was really surprised. And so one course after another, little by little, I thought, let's put together some real tangible steps. The thing that I dislike that we talked about earlier is the gurus that have never done it. The guys who want to teach you how to build a business, but have never done it themselves. Yeah. Right. You mentioned pest control and door knocking. If there's any adversity in the world, it's through door knocking pest control.
Yeah. It was awesome though.
It was great. Yeah. It's fantastic. Right. Absolutely. And then not only, okay, after you've door knocked them and you've sold them, now you got to think on your feet while you're at the door, but now you've got to fulfill it, right? How am I servicing it? What's the contract? How am I taking forms of payment? Bro, there's a lot of energy required in order to do that simple transaction.
Yep.
And so when I would focus these cats in that same capacity in prison on their ideas, and I'd say, Adam, what do you want to do? I want to build pest control. Great. And I'd whiteboard just like we did together. Bro, their minds would expand.
Yeah.
And when I realized then, I thought, okay, if I can attach to you this purpose that is so ingrained in you that when you get out, this is who you are. You are now Adam, the pest control guy, Adam, the personal trainer, whatever it might be, then you would have a shot of not coming back.
Yes.
Amen. And underneath that, I'm going to layer it with some cool stuff. I'm going to get you your credit report. We're going to make sure you walk out if you have a loved one with an unsecured credit card, right? Like all of these little things that you and I take for granted, right? You're down in South America, you want to jump on a plane. I bet you pay for it with a credit card.
Yep.
Right? Like most
Travel rewards credit card.
Absolutely, right? I'm sure it is. I'm sure you got points and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Most of these guys don't even know where to go to apply for one, let alone that they should be looking for a $0 annual fee. On, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, we just got to boil this way down, way down. It was a beautiful experience. And so that's where I really started. And, over the last decade, we really expanded. We're in 17 states at this point, 500,000 tablets on a nightly basis. And we just have a beautiful community with a few dozen programs, over 40 at this point. Everything from mindfulness to meditation to breath work to exercises, and then everything that could be tangible, the business 101 and a process with business 101. Here's what an EIN is. Here's what a Secretary of State is. Here's how you file your legal documents. Not just a pay me and see you later. No. I wanted to give it away. I believe that the ultimate flex for guys like you and I is being able to give it away at this point.
Yeah. Amen. 100%. And I started my addiction recovery with a 421 credit score. Like what am I supposed to do? Yeah. I learned, and before I hit 2 years, I was up above 700.
Yeah,
there's so many little tricks and hacks and things to do, and even just like starting your credit, helps you out a lot. So how does somebody start building their credit while they're in prison?
Great question. Couple ways. So your 3 credit bureau reports are free on an annual basis: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. You can get those twice a year for free. So we would order those. We'd write to them, order them, and get them in. If they had a loved one, it was obviously quicker because you could obtain it online, and then they would just mail it into them. Yep. We went through. So we'd start with that, get your credit report, and then we would go through and erase any derogatories. You've been incarcerated probably for a little bit of time. Let's remove some of these negative inquiries. We'll send a letter to them. They'll remove it. It'll bump your score up. Once that's taken place, then we move on to establishing credit. What I tell people all the time, there's no incentive for me. You go to creditkarma.com, you log in, you create a free, everybody, don't pay, it's free. You create a free account, and it allows you to see exactly what your credit score is, your FICO score. And then at the top, it will tell you, under the credit cards tab, it'll tell you which credit cards that you have a high approval odds for. Mm-hmm. We're looking for cards in a perfect world that have a $0 annual fee to start with. And then, of course, we'll look for, points and rewards and things like that. But the very first one is a $0 annual fee. Let's get that approved. And all of that can be done within the confines of a prison cell now, because of technology.
Wow.
Even easier if they have a loved one on the outside, because it can be done even quicker.
Yeah.
But that's the process that we go through. And so then they can walk out with a little bit of credit, even if it's a $300 card. They can walk out with a halfway decent score, depending on how many years they might have to work on it. Yeah. And they can walk out with some knowledge of what they want to do.
Amen. And I say this all the time. And the reason why my company is called Recovered on Purpose, and why I'm like jamming this in to the community, is I believe that purpose is the #1 relapse prevention. 100%. So or recidivism in the prison system. If they come out and they, they're not going right back into the gang life or right back into the crime life, they in prison, they've created this identity, this purpose that you're giving them, that you're talking about. When they exit, they have this whole plan to go do. So why would they go over here and go drink and party and, get back involved with them? I love that. I love it so much.
100% my goal, bro. It was 100% my goal, was just give them the knowledge that they were thirsting for, and then create tangible steps.
Yeah. And now, how is this going to continue to get into more and more prisons? And you said that a prison system actually hits you up. Mm-hmm. Aren't you like cutting back the recidivism rate? Why would they want to help this?
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple true stories that are sad and kind of a bummer. So to answer your question, I get both ends. When the leadership at the top of an institution sees that change can happen, they want to push any and all programs that they can, because it's good for their inmates. What I can tell you is that, unfortunately, because of the world that we live in, criminalizing almost everything is becoming the norm, right? You've got a lot of you have a lot of things that are happening now. I mean, you look at marijuana. We've been arguing about that for I don't know how many years now.
Yeah.
And so we all know, whether they want to say it out loud or not, but if the legalization is passed on a broad sweeping measure, you're going to have to answer to a few million people who have criminal records for something that is now free.
Yeah.
Something that is now legal. That's going to be a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow. And there's a lot of money to be lost there. Yeah. And so I think when you start to look at how the justice system has gone, you know, we have increased sentences, minimum sentence requirements that have been passed, you know, by the legislatures, require judges to sentence an individual in front of them to a minimum sentence. And so it really ties a judge's hand. And so they can't have Adam in front of them as a jaywalking recipient, first time, nonviolent. And they can't say, you know what, I'm going to give this young man a second shot. But they actually have their hands tied and they say, you know what, I've got to give him 6 months in jail.
Yeah.
Minimum sentencing requirements. So, but inside the prison system, a lot of wardens, a lot of deputy wardens really enjoy the programming. And the reason most of them do is because it dampers any of the violence that happens on the yard.
Yeah.
So typically when you have a good program on the yard and you get a few hundred people involved, you can have a yard rally around like our courses. So let's say we have a course every Friday from 8 to 11 a.m. The yard is going to be acting a little bit differently that Friday to make sure that nobody does anything stupid, so that everybody can get out of their cells or their pods or their units, and they can all come together to expand their minds and have a good experience.
Yeah.
That's kind of really the goal of the programs. And so a lot of the wardens will see that and they'll want that on their yard. Now, fast forward, there is, and I just had a couple uncomfortable conversations that really kind of saddened me, but I had an individual tell me from an actual Department of Correction, tell me that they were frustrated and upset with me because I was making their department the Travis show. And I thought that was an interesting conversation. Right. To me, it was full of egotism. To me, it was full of nepotism. And unfortunately, they thought that it was me against them instead of us trying to come together to really solve a problem.
Yeah.
And so my response to them was, well, you know, you've been in the seat that you've been in for about 18 years, and your recidivism has gone through the roof in those 18 years. Yeah. And so perhaps there's a different way to do things. And we don't even need to say that you're wrong and I'm right. But what we need to do is sit down with people, because I know that you can't get a live branch from a dead tree. And so if this individual at the top thinks that my programs are going to make them look bad, this individual isn't going to want our programs inside.
Right.
And those are some frustrating conversations to happen, because in the Department of Corrections, you have some really good people that are trying to make some changes. And then you have some really higher ups that realize that there's a lot of dollars attached to people recommitting crimes.
Wow. And so you're doing this from a, you know, inside out. You're doing this from, you know, the solution of helping the inmates, getting in there, teaching them and everything. Do you have aspirations, or are you working on policy changes, working on going places and actually like saying this is garbage? You know, we have to do something politically for this.
Yeah, big time. You know, we work, us personally, no, we work with some organizations that have some deep roots into policy change. And I've made some good inroads with some legislatures around the country who are open and want policy changes.
Yeah.
And that's where I really think that we can start to make some real grassroots movements. If people really understood what happened behind prison walls, there would be blood in the streets. Right now, you know, we really glorify it. It's Hollywood-esque, you know, it's HBO's Oz, you know, it's I can't even think of it. Orange is the New Black, right? It just becomes very sensationalized and very sexy, and then you just kind of turn it off and go on. The reality is, when my community college was closed for vacation, the Department of Correction moved me to the elementary school, and I would open up chocolate milks and serve slices of pizza to kindergartners. And we would do that for 22 cents an hour. And you walk yourself through that, right? If I've been in those shoes, and I don't want any of my children being fed by inmates.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at the towns that most of these prisons are built in, they're usually built in some kind of crummy towns on the outskirts of nowhere. And their labor force is almost non-existent, and their wages are unable to be paid. And so the simplest solution is to hire 25 guys for the price of a half of one.
Right.
Right. And so that needs to be changed. That narrative needs to be told. Because if I wasn't good enough in my situation to be on the streets, why was I good enough to be on the streets as an inmate?
Mm.
It's a very confusing situation. If you want me as a 6-7 figure a year earner paying into the tax base, donating, offering gifts and services to the local schools, the food banks, etc., that's a good productive member of society. When you take that away and you put me at 22 cents an hour for 15 months, there's no productivity there.
Yeah.
Right. And so that like dichotomy needs to be changed pretty quickly and pretty severely. I think in general, I say this all the time and I'm using round numbers. 20% of the people in prison deserve to be there and need to be there. They've done some terrible things. And I think that that's where they belong. They're just not in society. Yeah. The other 20% of people I think are victims of circumstance. I'll tell you, I had a guy who in Oregon was working a double during COVID and was basically commuting and fell asleep at the wheel and, hit a family. And so they gave him 5 years for that vehicular manslaughter charge. Not high, not drunk, nothing, not a criminal, non-violent, not nothing. That man doesn't need to sit inside of a prison cell for the next 5 years and realize he did something wrong. He knows he did something wrong. The best use of that man's time would be to rehabilitate himself and then to tell other people how to avoid some of the pitfalls he's made.
Yeah.
Right. So you have the 20% that don't belong there. You have the 20% that absolutely belong there. But this middle of the road 60% is really where we need to focus on. And those are the individuals that need the accountability. They need their hand up, not a handout. Yep. And they need actual information that can take them from point A to point B. And most importantly, what they need is some empathy when they get out.
Yeah. Because literally, if you get if you're incarcerated, you're an ex-con, they say you only got a 3 or 4 or 5 year sentence or whatever. You serve that time, but you come out with a life sentence.
Life.
Strapped on your forehead as a convict, as a felon.
Life.
And they have this box you have to check to get a job.
Yep.
Saying I'm a felon.
Yep.
And I was, early on, I learned to lie in that box.
Yeah. Well, we all do. We all do. And I think that's it sucks. Anyways, it's just terrible. I have a girl, friend, a female friend, and she actually served prison time years ago. And she was married. She still is married to this man. Fantastic dude, fantastic woman. And because of her crime, the government came to him and said, hey, if you don't cooperate, you're going to get pulled in on this as well. And he said, I'm not going to cooperate at all. I had nothing to do with it. True story. So he ended up not going to prison, but they ended up giving him a slap on the wrist felony for not playing ball. And even though they incarcerated his wife, they stayed together through the whole process. Fantastic humans, great marriage now. Literally, this is a true story. Yesterday, he found out, she texted me, that his employer ran the background check, of 10 years ago and rescinded his job offer.
Oh my gosh.
Right. This is a decade old. This is a man with credentials. This is a man that never was incarcerated. Like that type of stuff, to your point, is a life sentence, and it's completely unfair. And I don't think that we need to live in a world that, gives everybody fair and gives everybody a trophy. But I think that there needs to be some common sense that goes along with some of these empathetic guidelines.
100%. And the process for, changing your life and being able to be an example, like, hey, I really have changed my life. This is what I'm doing now. Can I get my record expunged? It is not easy to do.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do.
Nearly impossible.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because this is like one of those problems that's like almost an unsolvable problem when you look at the macro of it.
Yeah.
Because it's like ingrained in our system to incarcerate people and make money off of them, right? And not to rehabilitate. Mm-hmm. So what is the macro solution to this from a change perspective of the actual system of prison? Like the system of prison, how do we change this so that people are being rehabilitated and, coming back and living in society without having to go back to the way they were.
Yeah, I think a couple things. If we lived in a perfect world, which we don't, but we're going to pretend for a minute we did. I think one of the first things would be term limits. I think just kind of by default, a lot of the judges and a lot of the POs, probation officers that I've spoken to over the years, they have a ton of preconceived notions.
Mm.
And I don't think that that's necessarily wrong on their part. The way that I subscribe to it, is like this. If you are a police officer and you've worked the same zip code for 20 years and it's always at nighttime, typically you're going to run into the same types of people.
Yeah.
Right. And so when it's a Tuesday morning and you're off duty and you're sleep deprived, and that typical individual, that schematic of an individual confronts you, all of a sudden it's front page news because you had an altercation as an off-duty police officer that killed somebody.
Yeah.
And I can speak from experience that a lot of judges will get in that same temperament. When you're reading case files every day by the dozens, and it's the same thing, right? Bald white male, swastika tattoo. Bald white male, swastika tattoo. Bald white male, swastika tattoo, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, that bald white male with a swastika tattoo now becomes your server at Olive Garden. That judge automatically has a preconceived notion. It's just human response. And so I think that's kind of one of the first things is that term limits. We see it now. People are really starting to talk about it from a political perspective. How do we really create change if the same person's been in office 60 years and they've done nothing?
Yeah.
I think that's one. But then I think two is really, the 2023 Pell Grant hopefully will change quite a bit for people. The opportunities of incarceration. What we know is that through education, when you get a bachelor's degree, you have a single digit recidivism rate, which means once you've got that bachelor's degree, your likelihood of going back to prison goes to almost 9% or lower.
Wow.
And anything higher than that, statistically speaking, when you receive a master's degree, it goes down to 1%. So it's almost gone. Wow. So education, term limits A, education B, and then C, I think an individual, when they're inside, their character really needs to be that what's being rehabilitated. Amen. If we can look at humans as humans and realize that we all make mistakes, we're all in this, flesh-covered sack of bones and blood, and that we're all going to make some poor choices along the way. But when we do, that there's some areas of opportunity there. Yes. Now, the areas of opportunity that I think are uncomfortable to really get over is, all of the individuals who work for me are former lifers. Mm-hmm. And so nothing will give you a sense of street credit, for lack of a better term, than walking into a prison and saying, hey, I had double life and I got out. I had triple life and I got out. Okay.
Wow.
My 15 months isn't cool enough. I didn't kill anybody, stab anybody. Like, it just isn't neat. Yeah. It's a paperwork charge. And so when you have somebody that can walk into a prison system and sit across from a 17-year-old and say, you know what, look at what I've done with my life, and I had it worse than you did. That, I think, is that third component. What's interesting is some of the largest companies in the world, like the Geo Group, they are one of the three companies that control prison policies.
Yeah.
They are unable to hire anybody with a criminal record.
How does that make sense?
I was waiting for you to get there.
How does that make sense?
It doesn't, right? It simply doesn't. You would never hire an Uber driver without a driver's license. You never hire a pilot without a pilot's license. So the Geo Group is one of the examples. And there's a few of them who are unable to hire felons. And so when you go, okay, but how does one rehabilitate the community that you're serving? How do you even serve or speak to the people that you're serving when you can't even relate? Not even an ounce.
Yeah.
So there's some of those things that need to be changed. And I think that's kind of the 3-step. It's very uncomfortable. We start with policies, we move into really education. And then the third program needs to be done from individuals who have walked those shoes.
Amen. I agree 100%. Are you connected with the Dream Centers?
Dream Center. No. Is that Charlie?
Denver Dream Center.
No.
Pastor B. I'm gonna connect you with these guys.
I'd love to be.
Yeah. They basically do all the everybody coming out on parole. They have to go through this program. Okay. And they go out in the streets and they talk to people that are out there doing the gangs and stuff like that. And man, these guys, I really connected with them. Lifers
Okay.
that got out with just
Yes.
these huge hearts, bro.
Yeah.
Because these guys that literally looking at their life
Mm-hmm.
behind prison, thinking they're never getting out of there. When they get out, you know, after 23, 25, 30 years, their heart is like, oh my gosh,
On fire.
on fire.
Yeah.
And you said something else. The recidivism rate goes down significantly when they get a bachelor's degree, and then even more when they get a master's degree.
Yes.
What kind of incentive could we give them on a grandiose scale, like a big scale? All inmates that get a bachelor's degree will get this. You know, how do we incentivize them? Because sometimes, you know, I wasn't really incentivized to have a bachelor's degree.
No.
Because the reward was you have a bachelor's degree that you paid for, you know.
Yeah, and 50 grand in debt. Congrats.
Right. What do you think
Yeah.
is something we could incentivize so that everyone in prison gets one?
Oh, man, I think honestly, so for example, it's not really that difficult so for example, when I went to the state of Arizona and first came in an intake, they had to make sure that I had a GED or high school diploma. And so it's part of their it's part of their requisites, part of their program. The state of Arizona actually gets paid for getting inmates a GED while incarcerated. And it's part of your process and your program in order to leave the prison yard. You have to have a GED or you have to have a diploma. And I think it would be very interesting if you're talking about associate's degrees. If you're talking about, I think it could almost be treated in a fashion like a high school, where you said, look, here's a certain amount of things you have to do, but here's a certain amount of electives that you've got. And if you elect to, you know, bust your butt and get a 4-year degree, you know, done in the time that you're here, or a 2-year degree, or however much effort you want to put into it, I think that would be an incredible incentive for folks to really reduce their prison sentence based on their educational requirements.
100%. That's actually where I was going with it, because if they're being really rehabilitated for 10 years, you know, their sentence is a 10-year sentence.
Yep.
And they have to stick in there for 10 years, and that confinement is what's supposed to rehabilitate them. If getting a bachelor's degree drops their likelihood of recidivism down to 9%, and a master's degree drops it down to 1%, doesn't that literally mean that they have been rehabilitated?
You would think, right?
Yeah,
Pretty
I would.
simple. Yeah, pretty simple. Yep.
Huh. I love it. I love it. So what would you say to people out there that maybe they haven't been to prison?
Mm-hmm.
They aren't necessarily completely involved in this. If they're listening right now, what could they do to support this, to help this cause, if they have that heart for it? What could they do?
First of all, I think it's pretty incredible if they do have that heart for it. You know, we have a sponsor and inmate program that allows, it's kind of twofold. We have a sponsor and inmate program, which gives them education and literacy in a vast majority of subjects. And then we also have a sponsor a family program. That's something that's been really pulling at my heartstrings the last couple of years. Is the youth that have parents that are incarcerated are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves. Wow. And so for us, I want to talk about it. And, you know, this year, for example, we had the Convicted Conference. We put 1,000 kids under a roof that had justice impact in some capacity. We just are in the process of doing a prison yard carnival, where we're bringing family members to the prison, allowing the inmates to have like a carnival, games, prizes, toys, hot dogs, hamburgers with their loved ones. I think as much as that situation sucks, if we're being honest, mom and dad being incarcerated still needs to be talked about, so that we don't have young children that are growing up confused, that are growing up addicted, that are growing up without identity. And so I think it's imperative that if a dad wants to be involved with his children and vice versa, that we make that happen.
Yeah.
So we have a sponsor, a family program that allows us to bring families together on a consistent basis. We walk them through, we have a program for it where we talk about things that aren't supposed to be spoken about. You know, we make sure that dad comes full circle with his accountability, why he's there, why mom might be there. And dad and mom need to have, because that's also an uncomfortable conversation, dad and mom need to have authentic dialogue about what they did wrong and take complete responsibility for it. And then they need to tell the kids, because you can't just go to junior high every day and you look in the football stand and all of your friends' dads are there, but your dad's not there. You have to talk about that. And so if that really gives the individual or the young man or young woman the ability to rehabilitate as a youngster, the ability to grieve and heal as a youngster, I'm hopeful that putting that family unit together, that reunification process, will allow that second generation not to make mistakes of the first.
Awesome. And where can they find that? How can they get involved in that?
Yeah, our nonprofit is accomplishedventures.org. ED on accomplished stands for education. So it's accomplishedventures.org. Gives you the ability to either sponsor an inmate or to help that family reunification process.
Awesome. I'm going to put that up right now. And I'm also going to put it in I spelled that right? And then the ED is capitals.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's lowercase there. Yep, it's perfect. No, it's perfect. You spelled it
guys,
right.
This is going to be in the show notes also. So if you want to find out more about what he's doing over there, go ahead and check it out. Sponsor some of these guys, man. He's literally, what he's talking about, sponsoring a family, that's prevention of a kid going down that path. And us in the recovery community, we are all super into preventing kids from going down the path of drugs. And a lot of these guys, a lot of these kids, we're able to help them. So Travis, I really, really appreciate you coming on, man. This is a great conversation, one that needed to be had. And man, thank you so much for coming.
I'm super grateful, brother. I'm glad you're here with us. Keep changing the world.
Amen. Love you guys so much.